Welcome to another episode of TERF Talk Down Under. I'm Stassja and with me is Ange. Hi, Ange.
Hi, Stas. How are you going?
I'm good. I'm back for this
Good.
week.
You're wearing your controversial pink wig.
It's a female penis.
It is. And you made the news this week in your female penis hat.
Did I?
Because we had some gate crashes at our event on the weekend, and you went over and gave them the sort of behaviour that they deserve. You mocked them by photobombing them, and those photos went viral.
Well, they did on Twitter. I didn't know I was in the news, though.
Oh, you're in the news somewhere. Someone said you're in the news, in the actual newspapers.
Oh. Well, it's been so crazy. It's hard to keep up with everything. You've been in the news as well this weekend.
I am absolutely exhausted. Like, I'm a mum. I've got 4 kids. I know what exhaustion is like, and I am on another level. That I thought that we'd have our event and there'd be a little bit of net on Twitter and maybe a little bit of news coverage, which would be really exciting. But I never, ever, ever expected to wake up the day after a women's event, mostly attended by middle-aged women. Many of them were lesbians, and the majority being left-wing women. I never imagined that I would wake up the next day to Daniel Andrews and the opposition leader calling us Nazis. And not only that, the opposition leader naming me and my Nazi friend Kelly J as the organisers of a Nazi event.
So let's get really clear. There has been like pretty obvious defamation against you. What
and
exactly?
Moira and Pat Steves and Kelly J.
Well, and everyone that was there for Let Women Speak, but what specifically did I think it was John Pessuto named you? Is that right? What did he say?
He said that I was a Nazi and that I was a Nazi organizer and I had organised the event as a National Socialist, as a Nazi. Now, that was based on 2 things. One, a very casual association with Kelly J. So I was in a picture with Kelly J, therefore he said we were in cahoots. And the other thing was I was arguing with trolls for like 12 hours straight. And one of the trolls was just coming at me constantly. And I think he's the sort of guy that needs his hard drive checked. And so he was sort of hammering me, going, you've got the same beliefs as Nazis. You've got the same beliefs as Nazis. And no matter what defense I had, he wouldn't shut up. So I said, yeah, women and Nazis want to get rid of pedo filth. Why don't you?
Yeah.
And it was in hindsight, it was a sloppy tweet because it should have been obvious what they might do with it. But it's not my name is Angela and I'm a Nazi tweet either. It was a sloppy tweet in response to a troll when I was really tired and sick to death of being told that I have the same views of Nazis, which I find abhorrent. And it was a sloppy tweet, but that tweet was taken out of the context of the chat and used as evidence of me being a Nazi. And the weirdest thing about it was then all these right-wing commentators, including Peter Credlin, Andrew Bolt, and Corey Bernardi, were saying, that's a reasonable question. Isn't everybody against pedophiles? And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, look who's defending me, right? And then on the side of the people that, my former anti-fascist friends, my friends who have, fought beside me on the left, some of my fellow TERFs who know that, I'm a vegan, a lefty, all that stuff. Some of them were coming and saying, you should be ashamed of yourself. I never want to speak to you again. So I was in this sort of parallel universe where my, natural political enemies were defending me, and people who I thought would be by my side defending me were berating me and kind of colluding with this ridiculous idea that I am somehow responsible for Nazis turning up at our feminist event.
Yeah. Oh my God. Look, I know where you're coming from. I just ignore the trolls. So as you mentioned, I got captured on film photo bombing the Nazis. Now, fuck me down dead. Do I have to explain that it was a joke? Well, seems like I do, because I've even had gender critical women, and I'll point out that they are not public with their views,
Oh,
coming at me telling me how I need to explain myself. So look, some of you might remember me on Q&A yelling out from the audience at Hannah Mounty, Callum, old mate Callum. I don't always have the best impulse control. And, when I saw these dudes in black standing next to our event with a giant sign saying "Destroy pedo freaks," I was like, who the fuck do these guys think they are? And I just had this, I could see they were doing like a photo shoot. So I was just like, right, I'm fucking getting in there. I'm gonna make a mockery of these guys. So yeah. I just like spur of the moment ran over there. And when I got there, I didn't know what to do.
yeah.
I just went like this with a fucking ridiculous grin on my face. And you know that feeling, that sense of danger, that like you walk into a room and you just feel a sense of danger. That's what I felt standing in front of those guys. I'm trying to hold this ridiculous grin, and my face was twitching a little bit because I realized that I was actually in sort of a dangerous situation.
You're laughing.
And so I just did that for like, I don't know, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then ran back to the event. Now, I did consider on Twitter saying, well, at that point, I didn't actually know they were Nazis. We hadn't seen them do the salute at that point. But then I was like, you know what? I'm not going to bother, because if I say that, you know what the fucking response is going to be?
I don't care.
It's going to be, you should have known. They were dressed in black and they had that sign. You should have known. You knew they were Nazis and you're a Nazi sympathizer. That is the state of things. So that's about all I have to say about that.
I think if everybody treated Nazis, everyone treated Nazis how you did and mocked them and laughed at them, they'd have no power. Like this was a deliberate recruitment drive for Nazis, and the media completely fell into their trap because the Nazis were on the front page and they were offering themselves to young men as an antidote to the encroaching gender ideology that puts mentally ill boys who pretend to, be adult babies or whatever. And, the kids that are getting sucked into the gender thing, it's like the antidote to that is now being presented as Nazis. And kids are going to get sucked into that in the opposite direction. So, this was a recruiting drive for Nazis, and the media is complicit in that. But the ridiculous thing that's come out of all this is feminists have been blamed for Nazis being at the event. Now, the Nazis turned up to the event because Campaign for Racism and Fascism, the NUS Queer Uni Collective, and a ragtag bunch of pathetic incel, bearded, anti-fascists or whatever they are, all put out all these things. We're going to fight the right on the 18th of March. We're going to fight the right. We're going to fight the Nazis. Kelly J is a Nazi and she's a fascist, and we're all going to turn up and fight them, right?
Yeah.
And so that's an invitation, because if you put it out there that you're going to fight the right and you're actually going to turn up and try and rip through a police line to smash on with a group of mostly middle-aged women there to tell their personal stories, and the Nazis don't show up, they'll never live it down either. So they're going to look like cowards who let women take a beating, right? And these Nazis are dumb as dirt, right? They are so fucking dumb. But they have their bro code where they don't want, they don't want to be seen to be letting women get bashed, because, to anyone with half a brain, unlike the friggin' disgusting rapey-eyed incels I saw trying to bash their way through the line to get to us, it's not a good look to let women get bashed.
I'm just so the leader of that Nazi display last Saturday, his name's Tom Sewell or Sewell.
Yep.
Sewell. He did an interview on Odyssey with this guy called Blair Cottrell.
And just their names make me. Yep.
I went and had a bit of a look. I watched about 40 minutes of it. At one point, Tom Sewell says that transsexuals have participated in a satanic ritual by having their genitals cut off. So right there, you can see that there's a big difference between women like us and what we believe about transgender people compared to that. But I'm just, so this woman, she's gone on to Odyssey, she's created her own account, she's called it I Stand with Moira Deeming MP, and she's got in the comments and started giving them some shit. And I'm just going to read out a few of the responses that she received in the comments. So this is the Moody Jews responding to her saying, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth so you could shut up and listen when men are talking. Really gender critical feminist values going on here, as you can see. Next one, teaching women to read was a mistake, but since it's too late in your case, blah, blah, blah. Another one, why should women have rights? And this one kind of takes the cake. Stupid monkey bitch. Now, these guys like to throw around the word monkey because they are racist. I'm going to point out very clearly that Moira Deeming read out a message from a Muslim friend of hers. That was what she read out. And on top of that, Moira has some Maori ancestry.
And Moira's friend was too scared to attend herself.
Yeah. So a lot of our fans will already be aware of all of this, but given the media attention, perhaps we're educating some new viewers.
Oh, look, I didn't do a video for 2 weeks, and the last video I did was just me and Ruth Gamble having a chat, and the numbers are climbing as everyone comes over to see, comes over here for some Nazi rants and ends off listening to me talking about lesbianism in the 80s, So yeah, I'm sure people will come over here to be educated, and they might learn something, because the seeing Nazis come up to our rally and stand next to us was as weird and dystopian as hell. And the way that the police marched them out past the trans rights activists instead of out the nearest exit, and the fact that the TRAs didn't, or none of the anti-fascists chased after the Nazis, they all stayed here trying to break through the police line to attack us. And I was the lead, I was down on the boundary of our group to watch to see if they broke through the line, because my job was to alert the stage if the line broke. And for a couple of seconds there were anti-fascists and trans activists underneath horses punching their guards, right? Of course, it didn't care really, but but my job was to make sure that if that line broke, that we got the hell out of there. So so I got to see, I was, while everyone was focused on the speakers, I could barely hear them, and I was looking forward, and I was looking and walking along the crowd and looking for any infiltrators, looking to alert police to people trying to jump the line, because it happened the whole time. And men were threatening to rape me, men were yelling out death threats, men were making fist gestures at me, and even cutthroats. And I looked into the eyes of some of these men, and some of them are known to me because they were on the left when, in anti-fascist circles that I used to mix in, and they're known to me through, trolling me on Twitter and Facebook and from previous protests. And I got to see in their eyes, and all I could see was a frightening level of rage towards women. That was quite jarring. As I looked into their eyes, I had that same prickly feeling that you get when, you're late home and you're walking at an empty train station at 10:30 at night towards your car, and you can hear footsteps. It's that feeling of just not being safe around men. And I had that the whole time I was at that event, because, of the level of rage, and because it was directed at us. And it wasn't just, we're going to break through that line and we're going to smash their banner, and you knew that if the line broke, they were going to bash us. And the police said to me a couple of days before, they tried to talk us out of having the event, or they tried to talk us into moving the event, because they said that they'd intercepted credible threats of violence towards a few of us, and many towards Kelly J, but also Kath, Moira, a couple towards me, because I give them a bit of lip. And so the fact we got out of there, relatively unscathed. One of our wonderful friends fell and was pushed over when one of the trans rights activists grabbed the microphone at some stage, and she fell and smashed her head on the concrete, and we were deeply concerned for her. She had to go to hospital and get checked out, and she had concussion, and so that was absolutely awful. But apart from that, and a few minor injuries like bruises and stuff from getting kicked by rabid trans activists as we dragged them out of our events, everybody was safe. Nobody was seriously hurt. So, it was such a godsend, because there was probably about, maybe 200-300 of us. That's the media reported that there was about 300 of us. So there was probably 600-700 of them. I personally expected a lot more on their side. So I think, and I said this to them before it happened. I said, the whole optic of you going to attack a peaceful group of women's rights activists is terrible. Not everybody, when people hear TERFs and they think of these nasty people, but the average person says, realizes that you're going to go and attack women's rights activists, they're going to think you're crazy, And so that's what happened, So I think a lot of people stayed home because of, it's just wrong,
And, I want to point out that yesterday, Lydia Thorpe, according to the ABC, was pulverized by police. Now, I would suggest that police officer didn't know who she was. She was behaving in a menacing, ridiculous way. And he was just like, right, I've got to get this one out the way. It's unfortunate that happened, but, I'm pretty sure not a single news outlet has reported on our friend who was fucking knocked unconscious by a transgender activist. But, Lydia Thorpe wasn't knocked unconscious. So that's disappointing. I have actually connected our friend with a journalist, but
good.
With all this going on, I'm not sure that it's going to get up. But I would also like to give a big shout out to the Hobart women and the Canberra women. The Hobart event looked really scary, unsafe. Isla McGregor was threatened with having her head bashed in or something like that. Had her foot stomped on by some trans activists. That just looked so hostile. And I really commend the women who got up and spoke off the top of my head: Isla McGregor, Anna Sharman, Louise Elliott, because even I'm not sure that I would have got up and spoke in front of like just that level of hostility and hatred. Like these people are the haters.
A couple of coppers watched that footage and they said it seemed like that that someone had told them not to do anything. Like he said, you know, he goes, that goes, what he saw in the footage went against everything that they're taught. So he was under the impression that someone had told them not to, you know, not to stop the protesters from coming forward and intimidating these women. So, you know, that directive might have come out of the parliament that they were protecting, you know.
Yeah,
pretty dodgy that women can't even go out and speak. And this is the whole thing, though. You know, in all this, you know, craziness and, you know, being misrepresented as Nazis, and, you know, the only voices that aren't out there are the women who spoke.
Yeah.
The very voices that we were trying to amplify. Our Premier is so desperate to not have those powerful voices of everyday women come out that he has falsely conflated feminists with Nazis.
Yeah.
That is how powerful those women's voices are.
It's outrageous.
Still, yeah, every single, I spoke to a couple of journalists. All of my interviews ended off on the chopping room floor. One, because I'm a Nazi now, and two, because the things I talk about are so controversial, like autogynephiles, like surgery on children, that, you know, the ACON AWI stops them talking about it at all. So I just, chopping room floor for me. Now, you know, very, very few of us have been asked anything. We've been completely misrepresented. We've not been given any right of reply. None of the major news agencies, Channel 9 contacted me, but I ended off on the chopping room floor. ABC, The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald, you know, none of the news agencies have reported anything of any of the speakers at the event. They haven't spoken to any of the marshals at the event, and they haven't spoken to me as the organizer of the event, but they have talked about us at length and decided that we aren't women's rights activists, that we are anti-trans activists, and it was a anti-trans event, not a women's rights event. They're deliberately misrepresenting us in every single major news platform except for The Australian. And the Herald Sun first went with the women are Nazis, but a couple of days later backtracked and actually gave quite an accurate portrayal of what happened, but without actually speaking to any of us. With all our pictures in the newspaper, but without, you know, saying, you know, Miss Jones, can you clarify that? Or Miss Jones, you got a comment? Or Kelly J, is that what happened? Or, you know, anything. Nobody. And, you know, when people would say to me, you know, oh, you want to talk? And I go, well, the speakers speak for me. The women who spoke at the event, they're my voice. Go and listen to them. And that's my opinion too. What they're talking about is the message that I want to get across, because that's what they asked me. If you got any message you want to get across? And I go, listen to the goddamn live feed and listen to women speak. And it makes me so mad that out of everybody involved in this bullshit, that these politicians and the media have succeeded in silencing the women we needed to platform the most.
Look,
that's my rant.
I don't think that all is lost. I think a lot of people are looking on, watching this, and, you know, people are very distrustful of mainstream news these days.
They are now.
There was a really good guy on, what's his name? Rashenk or something.
Yeah, someone told me he was a wife beater, so I deleted my share. But yeah, Rukshan or something, real Rukshan is a Sri Lankan dude, and he tries to from both sides.
I thought that he did a pretty good job of explaining what he saw on the day, and funnily enough, even he, a guy of, I don't know, Indian or Sri Lankan background, yeah, a man of color, was called a Nazi by the trans activists. So, and, you know, they've been doing this for so long, trying to link us with far right Nazi bullshit.
Two of our marshals are Asian.
They are on the record in America. There was some LGBT like organization or think tank group that said Oh, okay. Well, we're not getting a lot of support on allowing men to compete in women's sports. So one way around this is to link opposition to racism. Okay, so we know that this is your gameplay, but we also know that most Australians see through it. And funny enough, even World Athletics today came out with a full-on Nazi stance, which is men will no longer be allowed to compete in women's athletics. So
that is the best
are you
news.
seriously casting World Athletics as Nazis? Are you that fucking dumb?
They are. They're that dumb. Yeah. I think that the really interesting thing that happened for me was after, you know, the event, which was surreal, and then the next day where Dan Andrews was calling women Nazis, and then the ridiculous raising of the trans flag, which some legends on Twitter, they put it, one of them put it to Nazi music, right? And that had me in stitches. But the one that really got me is someone put it to the really bad recorder musing of My Heart Will Go On, like the Titanic song. And I was tears. But it's funny, in the moment when you know, they put on the news that Dan had raised the trans flag, I think it was Monday night, you know, still when they were saying we're all Nazis, and he's raising the symbolic flag. And I think a lot of people were freaking out on Twitter. I was in a couple of chats where people were going, oh, fucking hell, he's raised the flag, you know, and saying, oh, this is the most terrible thing. And I had this massive grin on my face, because it was like the white flag. To me, it was like a white flag going up. And I thought to myself, this is the beginning of the end of Daniel Andrews. And so that's a bet. So, you know, that's it. I reckon that this weekend, the weekend where a bunch of misfit sort of feminists who are demonized in society, holding a peaceful event and being counter-processed by lunatics, which made some of the worst people in society turn up to counter-protest, has somehow finally pulled the rug under Daniel Andrews and revealed him to be a deceptive, evil, greedy, malicious, petty, and shallow individual.
I just want to acknowledge there was a really good article in The Spectator on all of this called Guilt by Association. It's by a woman called Petra, I think it's pronounced Bueskens. And I'll just read out one little quote from, she tried to get that article published in The Age, and they rejected it, of course. But she wrote, to suggest that gender-critical feminists are neo-Nazis is transparent bullying, and it's coming from the top. Literally, the leader of the Victorian government. It has the sanction of the mainstream media, who are hacks failing in their duty. I think she absolutely nailed it. Please check it out. Petra Bueskens is an honorary fellow in the School of Social and Political Sciences at the University of Melbourne, and she's also a psychotherapist who runs her own private practice. But like, have a read of that article, and you know what she said about it's coming from the top. And it's like, women can't even talk about this without being called Nazis, bigots. It's like to frame gender critical women's position on, I don't think that rapists should be put in women's prison. To frame that as hate and bigotry, it just like shuts women down from before the conversation has even started. How do you have any sort of public discussion or debate around these topics when the moment you open your mouth, you're told you're a Nazi? It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Check out that article, everyone.
I did a radio interview. A radio station in Queensland was brave enough to have me on briefly to talk about what. 2HD Newcastle, and they asked me why we had the event. And, I realised in hindsight that I didn't talk about medicalising children, but I talked about autogynephiles. And it's I think the first time I've heard autogynephiles talked about, publicly. And it's ironically, I posted on Twitter, and a lot of autogynephiles watched it and jumped into my inbox to give me some commentary on it. Also, there was a lot of feedback with people going, holy shit, in the same way that I did like years ago when I realized that my father-in-law wasn't the sort of trans person that I knew he was, that I knew when I was young. He wasn't like the gay man uncomfortable in his body. And relieved by feminizing himself because he was so effeminate, like naturally effeminate. These were, men who presented as heterosexual men for half their life, and then all of a sudden that decided that they're women. It didn't make any sense. So, and I think after that, quite a few just everyday people, doing whatever they were doing on the day that I was on the radio, just woke up and we knew something was off, but we didn't know what it was. And this is it, because the media's been so successful in keeping the moderates and the everyday people completely out of the loop, so that when you say to them 15-year-old girls can have their breasts chopped off in Melbourne, they just don't believe you. And they say, well, I've never seen it written anywhere at all. I've never heard it on the radio. It can't be happening because there's no evidence. But you saying it and it being heard is enough for their little brains to go, wow. Because none of the Tavistock stuff's really made the news here in Australia. Even Nicola Sturgeon getting the boot was on the down low. It was in the news that she got the boot, but the issue of having male rapists in female prisons didn't even make a blip in the news here in Australia. But I think people are starting to wake up to that there's things happening overseas that they're seeing pop up on Twitter that they don't quite understand, that aren't being covered here. But I also think that with World Pride, I think a lot of same-sex attracted people have woken up that it was like Mardi Gras, that it stopped things, LGBTQ, it's just gone to another extreme. Like Julie Bindel said, it's not an acronym anymore, it's an unbreakable Wi-Fi code. And I agree with her. And, some of the nefarious interests that are attaching themselves to the other end of the acronym, like the adult babies, the furries, it's increasingly becoming about protecting them rather than the LGB. And I think every day, lesbians, gay people, and even straight people who, understand the fight that gay people went through to get the rights that they have today, are looking at this trans stuff and going, something's not right, but nobody's allowed to say it. Nobody.
Yeah, I definitely piqued a friend by explaining to her what autogynephilia was, and she was like thanking me. And just on what you said, I had the pleasure of interviewing Bernard Lane a number of weeks ago. So if you don't know him, he runs Gender Clinic News, the Substack. And he's been, investigating the medicalization of children for, like 5 years or something now. And right now he writes on it full time. And even he said, when there are still occasions where he will say to people, just about puberty blockers, children are being put on puberty blockers, and they'll say to him, no, that's not happening. Dude, he's been investigating this for years. What do you mean that's not happening? It's the culture of silence that we have on this here in Australia is hopefully now over. Let's see. But you've got to, Kelly J is being criticized in some circles for leaving behind a trail of destruction for women like us to have to deal with, because she's on her way to New Zealand now. But yes, someone described it as she provides a flashpoint for these issues, and that's definitely what she's done here. People are actually talking about it. Hopefully it has made women braver to stand up and say, well, no, I don't think that rapists should be allowed in women's prisons. No, I don't think that men should be allowed to destroy women's sport. And I really encourage everyone who is not yet public on these issues, now is the time. Now is the time. Go public, say what you think. If you get sacked, well, the media is now paying attention, and there are lots of us who will support you. I know that's easy for me to say, but I really think now is the time.
Yeah, and hats off to Moira Deeming too. You know, I get a lot of shit. They go, oh, you hang around with a right-wing Christian that is anti-abortion, right? That woman is braver than 90% of her critics, like all of them. Actually, every single one of her critics. Like, you know, people are so thick. Moira is a woman and she is a mother, right? People think, and particularly men, people think, you know, men think that you can only hang around with other men who share your the same interests. Like, oh, I'm into cars, so I only hang around with men who are into cars. Cliche. I'm a left wing, so I can only hang around with left wing. But what happens when you become, particularly when you become a mum, but just when you're a woman, you know, the universal experience of being a woman, right? You know, you'll hang out with other women at work, whatever. But particularly when you're a mum, you get talking to other mums while you're waiting for kids to do sport, or you're waiting outside the schoolyard or whatever, and you find yourself in a social group with a bunch of different women from all different political perspectives. You're not in an echo chamber because your children aren't, you know? So I think more that, you know, this criticism of women who associate with women from opposing political viewpoints is from people who are so afraid that they're so shaky in their belief in themselves and their own politics that they can't trust themselves if they're around anyone with an opposing political view. Now, I stand on the polar opposites of Pauline Hanson, right? I agree with her on this one issue, which is gender. She's harming me in other things that she's involved with, like inciting MRAs to challenge the family court. So I'm not a fan of her politics at all, and I've got skin in the game. But I respect Pauline's right to turn up yesterday as a woman and speak as a woman, right? Even if it is for her own vested interests. Doesn't mean I'm a fan of her, but my social media this morning is full of you and Pauline together from the people that I share 99.9% of my politics with that is exactly the same. You know, I'm a vegan. You anti-fascist are a vegan. Are you a Nazi? You know, their own fucking logic doesn't go back towards themselves. You know, the men, and it's men and a handful of women, the men who've been full-time abusing me in my tweets, which 90% I ignore, but sometimes I like having a little biff back, especially if it's someone I haven't seen for 5 or 6 years who I used to be mates with in the left, who when I said, no, I don't believe men are women, I don't think it's possible to change sex, they said, well, you know, all the good work you do turning up and supporting our events and all the money that you've given us for all our social justice stuff, thanks very much, but you can piss off. When they come out of the woodwork to try and stick it into me and accuse me of being a Nazi because they know how offensive and insulting that is towards me, I'll give them a bit back. And I've owned every one of them. So, you know, we are on the right side of history. The only people that weren't allowed to speak are the women who we were trying to let speak. We are right. We are doing something noble here. Kelly J is a controversial character, just like Moira is a controversial character, just like I'm a controversial character. I don't expect people who watch this channel to agree with me on everything, but I expect them to be open-minded and to have the intelligence and the critical thought to give me the benefit of the doubt sometimes, you know? And that's what being a leftist used to be about. It used to be listening to the underdog, no matter who they were, and giving them a chance. And now it's all fucking identity politics, and people that are in this cause trying to give big names to themselves rather than to get out on the streets and fucking fight for women with anyone. It's like there's all these, these purity feminists sitting in having a latte while women from all walks of life and all political beliefs are literally in the trenches being fired upon with machine guns, fighting for their lives, and they're sitting back there and criticizing us for getting, working in with Kelly J. Well, it's not your children that's getting threatened. It's not your location that's been given out, because people are actually believing the most ridiculous thing, that I'm a Nazi.
I think I'm a bit immune to the whole the gaslighting part of all this. I don't know why exactly, but it just like doesn't stick. Like, all you have to do is like laugh at them, say, no, that's not true, and get on with your day. And yeah. I'd like to give a shout out to Holly Lawford Smith. She made a very funny tweet, and it went something like, I'm starting to see that Nazis are a bit like King Midas in that anything they touch turns to Nazi. Like something like that.
Oh, bless her.
And I'm really looking forward to I'm pretty sure that Holly is working on an article regarding this whole fiasco for Quillette.
Excellent.
So the other thing about what happened on Saturday is that the freedom fighters were there. Oh. And no one's given them a mention.
Yes, they have. They accused the freedom fighters that were talking to the Nazis of being TERFs. And I'm going, they're the freedom fighters. People are going, the freedom fighters aren't there. The freedom fighters are walking around with their frigging megaphones going, the vax is going to kill you, man. They weren't with us, obviously. And they were between us and the Nazis. But there's photos of them looking at the Nazis, and everyone's going, they're the TERFs. And they've got freedom fighter written on their T-shirts.
And
just crazy.
They did even worse than we did. I've seen footage of one of the freedom fighters shaking hands with one of the Nazis. And are they copying the level of shit that we're copying? No.
No way. Nah. Oh, that's funny. That is so funny. Oh, what a wild few days. But I tell you what, on the surface, it looks like TERFs are just, the worst possible people. But, everyday Australians have woken up. Everyday Australians are looking and going, well, what are these TERFs about? And a tiny scratch below the surface. And they're like,
oh, TERFs are right about everything.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Pseudo and Moira. Like, I quite honestly, also Peter Credlin, she did a really good job. She did like a 5-minute monologue on what a dick move this is on behalf of Pseudo.
Thanks, Pete.
And it also got she got it published as an article in, I can't remember, the Herald Sun maybe. But she and others have pointed out that this is now a no-win situation for Pseudo. If they vote to kick out Moira, then they look like a bunch of misogynists blaming Nazis on a woman, right? If she remains, if they vote to keep her in, well, he's going to probably lose his short-lived leadership of the Victorian Liberals. So,
and then also, even though she might be kicked out of the Liberal Party, she's not kicked out of Parliament. So Moira will become an independent. And if the Liberals get anywhere close to being in government, her vote's going to count.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to screw her over. So, it's a win-win for Moira no matter what happens. But, if they were intelligent, they would, because what people are looking for, I think my worthless opinion is that politics is just stale, and it's full of people who are career politicians trying to, set themselves up for life. They'll take money from anyone in donations. They've got no integrity and no morals. Now, Moira has come in only on the basis of her integrity with her electorate, right? She's been vocal about her personal views from the get-go, but she has also not let them get in the way of representing her community. So she represents people, it's very, very multicultural electorate hers. She represents people who have very different political views to her, but she adequately represents them. Now, we are searching desperately for politicians like her who have integrity. And I think any party who gets rid of someone like Moira Deeming, even though she is not, someone who I would normally vote for, is an absolute moron. And if they were clever, they would have her be deputy leader by the next election and run with her into, potentially, getting in. So that's what I think. And I'm not saying that because I know Moira and like her. I'm saying that because I really believe in her as a human being, and that this person like her who stands up for what's right, no matter what people throw at them, who is articulate, who is smart, and who isn't intimidated by misogynistic piece of shit bullies, is a perfect foil for all of these men. And they're fucking shit scared of her. They're shit scared of any woman who just puts their hand up and says no. Moira terrifies her. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dan Andrews can see in his little freaking evil witch crystal ball, not witch, that's just insulting, but even evil whatever crystal ball, that Moira Deeming is going to kick his ass in the future. And this was a big stitch up to try and get rid of her. So, that's my conspiracy theorist tinfoil hat rant for today.
I would also like to say that the Victorian Liberals have done just such a piss poor job over the last however long it's been. Like we're in this endless dictatorship by Dan Andrews, for God's sake. I think, if when Pseudo loses his leadership, it's going to happen. That I think it's time the Liberal Party of Victoria puts a woman in charge.
Yeah, Moira.
Or Bev MacArthur.
Well, Bev, yeah. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know who Pseudo was until he defamed me. And people go, Pseudo's defamed you. And I'm like, who's that?
It's
because the Liberals are such a non-entity to me and have been for years. I don't even know who the leader was at the last election. I couldn't give a hoot. They're nothing to me. And Moira's put them on the map because, nobody knows who these clowns are, because all they do is Dan Andrews says something and they go, oh, yes, master. And they're meant to be his opposition.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I have only just yesterday memorized Pseudo's name. And prior to that, I was calling him prosciutto. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, he is dead meat. So, he's in a bit of trouble. So prosciutto, yeah. I hope Moira successfully sues him and everyone else who has defamed her with the revolting allegation that she is linked to white supremacists.
Yeah, it's so out there. Now, you've had something interesting happen again. Tom Tanaki, I don't even know this guy. He just seems
this is so funny. He's like a lefty edgelord. Like, he's a failed comedian, and he thought, if I make myself the king of the anti-fascists and I do videos and tell all these little kids what to do and all these disgusting, lefty beard bros from Fitzroy what to do, and we all go punch, we all want to go punch a Nazi, but no, there's this disgusting this man who had a nickname that I can't repeat because I'll be accused of ableism. And this guy picked a fight with Tom Tanuki, and he ran the other way and let his girlfriend get beaten up. So that's what, rumour has it, that's what happens when this man's actually confronted by Nazis, but he's content to let women be called Nazis and get, bashed by men. Anyway, I used to be an acquaintance of Tom because I used to support some of his comedy work because he actually used to be quite funny. And, he's done this video claiming that I'm a sad mum looking for friends and I'm moving to all these different social justice movements to find a friendship group. And I found one among TERFs, or my other sad, pathetic mums, right? That's the whole premise of this video that he's done about me. But just the fact that this, supposed leader of the anti-fascist Ed Lord, who's actually afraid of Nazis in his real life, and let his girlfriend take a hit, which is just awful, has done a video about me at all, where he's saying I'm a pathetic, sad mum, nobody, and yet he's made a whole video about me. Yeah. It's just really strange. But there's a lot of people, on the left who watch his videos because they're sometimes entertaining, and they're also, Tom and I have, very similar political views. His take on the Nazis using this whole thing as a recruiting drive, I 100% agree with him. I agree with Tom on almost everything except the vile misogyny in the left, where men take the credit for the hard work of women that, do all the research and do all of the hard work anonymously, and men like him take credit. And the fact that men cannot be women, and just because a man decides he is a woman, that, he is one. I reject that out. And that is the only way my politics and Tom Tanuki's differ. Right? Yeah. And yet I'm a Nazi and he isn't. So no, I think his video was the perfect own goal. Not only did he run the video of when I was all dressed up out with my friends, so I looked actually awesome in it, so people are going to go, oh, who's this bird? The horrible things he said about me, and the fact that he yelled and screamed into the camera when he was talking about me and got very defensive, because last year I asked him, when I first heard Kelly J was coming out, if him and his big talk and anti-fascist buddies could give us a hand keeping the Nazis away. He completely ignored me, and I brought that up the other day when I said, when everyone's saying, oh, the Nazis, you're in cahoots with Nazis, and I said, no, I actually knew they'd turn up. And the guy who sent you over to abuse me on my page, I actually asked for his help and he ignored it. And so he's done this big video to cry and kind of like, oh no, I ignored it because she's not worthy of my time, because she's a pathetic mum with no friends and no profile and not worthy of my time, and yelling into the screen about how abhorrent I am. And when he's talking about actual Nazis in the same video, his voice is calm. There's nothing patronizing. It's just normal talk. So it is the biggest own goal of all the hate that I've gotten the last few days. I thought his other troll friends, like this disgusting gremlin Pete Smith, coming out and having a cry because I had a drink with Kath Deves, was funny. But Tom Tanuki doing a video where he reveals all his misogyny and his absolute contempt for women, particularly those that say no to men like him, is the biggest own goal on the left. I can't stop laughing about it. So go and watch Tom Tanuki's video.
It's also contempt for mothers, like this slurring you as a bored mother. Like it's abhorrent. Like, it's misogyny, outright misogyny. I haven't actually watched it. I've just heard rumors, and I would like to give a shout out to a fellow YouTuber called Rubble of Empires. I'll link to his channel in the description if you want to go and have a look, because he's just recently done a bit of a deep dive into Tom Tanuki and Tom, like, dismissing WPATH's links to child sexual abuse material that's hosted on on the Eunuch archives. He's really made Tom Tanuki look like a pedophile apologist, to be quite frank.
Well, that's what these people are. We say, I've said 1,000 times that I don't have a problem with transgender people, that I have a problem with men. And I have a problem with the men attaching themselves to their movement. And so, misrepresenting us as anti-trans gives them, these blokes, you know, something, an excuse to abuse us, basically. But, you know, I don't have a problem with trans people. I have a problem with the fact that self-ID has no benchmark for who is trans and who isn't. And any man at all can claim a trans identity and gets a golden ticket into women-only spaces. Yeah. You know, the fact Tom can't see any problem with that says everything I need to know about him.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Bloody woke beards. Tell you what.
Maybe when Dan goes down, because everyone who's, you know, not just, I mean, most 90% of people, even myself up until, you know, 2015, you know, we tried not, you know, we were very careful in our language. We, you know, sort of, oh, you know, just, I don't want to hurt trans people's feelings, you know, I'll go along with it. You know, and that's most people. But when the truth comes out about the silencing of women, the dehumanizing of us, the lengths people go to make sure that our experiences of self-ID haven't hurt, you know, the trans widows, the detransitioners, you know, all those people impacted by self-ID that are growing as quickly as the number of people transitioning are growing, that nobody is even hearing about. You know, when those secrets start to come out, the average person's going to kind of pull back a bit and go, oh, hang on. And all these people who've gone the other extreme where they've said, yeah, furries are welcome, you know, furries are part of the community, you know, adult babies are part of the community. There's no coming back from that. And Dan Andrews, Tom Tanuki, and creeps like that, and the creep that I responded to on Twitter, who, you know, that tweet got taken out of context and whatever, those people will never, ever be able to come back from this. Coming back from, you know, thinking that dismissing WPATH concerns is just, it's pedo-apologism. And as far as I'm concerned, the one thing worse than being a Nazi is being a pedophile. But for them, it's the other way around. You know, the worst thing in their minds is a woman who says no. That to these anti-fascist men, these misogynistic, vile men's rights activists, a woman who says no is worse than pedophiles and worse than Nazis. And they prove that time and time and time and time again.
Pretty crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
and not all men, particularly not dwarfs who are men, right?
I think we're coming up on an hour.
Yes.
So look, I might return next week. Let's see what happens.
So much news to us, and you're all over it, whereas I'm not. I'm brain fried. And and look, we were meant to do a news episode last week because there was so much news, but you know, this Melbourne event's just gone kaboom in more ways than one. You know, I've been doing so much, so many of other wonderful people's podcasts and things because they want to hear what happened from someone who was actually there. But, you know, also, you know, I would really like to see some of the women that spoke at our event being guests on other people's podcasts, and some of the marshals that were at our event. Like, you know, the marshals in Melbourne, honestly, we had a big scandal in the marshal group at the beginning because some people were really upset that I was given, you know, the lead marshal role, and they have a right to be upset. But what happened then is that other women in the group used that as an excuse to undermine the group. So I sort of felt at some point that I basically didn't have any chance to create a unified team of women. So what happened was, you know, women were dropping off because they were angry at this situation that was beyond my control. It was a decision of standing for women, but they kind of tend to, you know, take it out on me. After that, you know, our group was quite small, and we had a few security issues with, you know, people that still had a loyalty to other women. But at the end, you know, we had this very small group of like about 10 women and a few others that actually came in from elsewhere in the state on the day. And they, you know, we had very little training. We had online training, but we were actually turned up early at the event because we were going to train, you know, just walk through the event as you do when you're a marshal, is you do, you know, you could do a walkthrough, and the TRAs were already there. So it was just straight into line, straight into formation, you know. And it was so frustrating for me because obviously a lot of those women had never marshaled before. But thankfully some had. And to see some of these women who had really, it wasn't quite obvious what we should be doing with all the different fronts and the police directions and TRAs invading and women asking questions, whatever. It was such a confusing environment. And every single one of those women stepped up and they went beyond my expectations. We were under-resourced, and it was like those marshals did the job of 5 women each. Like, they are just amazing. I can't fault them, and I'm so grateful to them because they made me look good. You know, the speakers on the day and those marshals, you know, are the reason that people that were happy with the event. And, you know, I'm just so indebted to them. They are wonderful women. Have them on your podcast, people. Have them on your podcast. Interview them for your, you know, your journalistic rags. Go on. Nobody else will.
Yeah, look, well done to all of the women involved in organising across Australia the different events.
Yeah, I'm a bit biased with my Melbourne girls, but yeah, everyone in Australia, you know, it's just a huge thing when you know your intentions are good and you are going to go out onto the street and you are going to be reviled and abused by strangers, particularly men who have the propensity to be violent, and you still go and you stand your ground, you are a hero, and you should all be very, 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 very proud of yourselves. So yeah, good on you, Aussie women, and you know, and some of the blokes that supported them. I think Pauline Hanson made enough fuss of the blokes yesterday for the next 5 years, you know. So yeah, I'll leave that to her.
Yeah, and you know, one of the women that was a marshal at the Melbourne event, she set up what was it, a charity for
greyhound rescue, a grassroots greyhound rescue, because greyhounds are notoriously difficult to rehome, and they take greyhounds out of pounds and they put them with foster cares and they rehabilitate them ready for adoption, right? And she founded this greyhound rescue. And then what happened was, you know, then they became sort of a collective, but her husband did most of the work, like the running around after the dogs and, you know, some of the fundraising and stuff. But then there was an actual collective that ran the group, which is how most of these things are run. Start off with 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, 4, you know. Anyway, after Juanita attended our event and her image was on television, and Daniel Andrews and John Pizzuto came and said that it was a Nazi rally, the greyhound adoption rescue kicked her and her husband out. They basically said, you have to resign. So
that's what's at stake, people. That's what's at stake. And that's why you need to be speaking out against this. You need to put your hand up at work and say, no. Otherwise, these pricks are just going to keep getting away with this trans McCarthyist fucking bullshit. So Look, there's so much more that we could say, but I think we're up to an hour, so we better end it there. It's been fun being back.
It's like you never left, Stas. You know, we had our usual technical difficulties beforehand. We've both said offensive things. We've sworn, you know, the old team's back together. And yeah, thank you so much for coming back, because I was really rapt when you said you wanted to come back and talk about this. And that honestly, I have had a few dark times in the last few days. Like, you know, I talk really tough on Twitter because, you know, like a lot of women, I don't like people to see the cracks in the armor, and particularly men. You know, I will not bend to men. I won't do a Lydia Thorpe, and I won't get down on my knees to any man. And I, you know, so I don't like to talk about my vulnerability, but I have had dark moments in the last few days. I really have, particularly worried for my children and for my physical safety, right? And then, you know, also the concerns about my future and the fact that my name is out there as a Nazi in all the media for the rest of eternity. So yeah, when your unicorn wig and people are going, look at this with this woman and her behavior with these Nazis, and I'd zoom in on the photo and I'd see that ridiculous smile on your face and these Nazis looking at you like this, and I'd be in tears of laughter, thinking it's the funniest thing I'd ever seen, because that's how we all should teach Nazis. We should just make them impotent with our humor. Good on you, Stas.
Keep making fun of Nazis, everyone.
Yeah. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Oh, and a special thank you to the Patreon subscribers. You paid for the very expensive pieces of dowel for the LGB and suffragette flags and for some of our banners that we had at the event. Your money paid for those things, and I'm very, very, very grateful because dowel is bloody expensive. So, you know, thank you very much to our patrons for that, and to everyone who's liked, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much.
Cheers, everyone. Might
thank you.
Might not.
Bye.